Everything's for Sale is a debut studio album from Boogie, not to be mistaken with the YouTuber or Boogie with a Hoodie, which I initially did. I thought this was a Boogie with a Hoodie album, but I was very wrong. But no, this is in fact the debut album from Shady Records, signee Boogie. Initially, I was kind of worried about going into this album. I saw Shady Records. The streak Eminem has been on has been abysmal. I really did overrate Kamikaze. It is not a 5 out of 10, it's more like a 4 out of 10. It really was bad. There was also Revival, which is pretty much becoming like a contender for like top 10 worst albums of the decade by so many people at this point. It's really sad to see Eminem fall so low. I was never that huge of a fan of him to begin with, but you know, to see a rapper fall this low is pretty sad. The other reason though I was worried about this was that it's Shady Records. It's a roster that is currently looking pretty abysmal in my opinion. I don't really see any great talent on there. You would think Eminem at this point in his career would be, you know, recruiting smaller names, you know, fresh young rappers that can really come into the game with full force as opposed to dropping his own bad albums. But all we really have is Yellow Wolf and West Side Gun, and of course now Boogie. So the roster is looking really thin, and West Side Gun's album from last year I didn't even bother talking about because it was just so boring and dull that I had nothing to say about it whatsoever. And it's almost a very similar situation with Everything's for Sale, because this album was incredibly dull. I have very little to say here. This was... So the album is very much traditional, jazzy, soulful, hip-hop samples across the album. It isn't like generic or anything like that, but it is very familiar with the beat selection that Boogie has decided to go for here. But it does, for me, kind of fall into J. Cole levels of like drab, uninspired, tepid beats that move at a really, really slow pace and never feel like they ever get going. Boogie's laid back flow just adds to this album's lacking of any kind of interesting momentum. And that's not to say that every hip hop album needs like fast flows, speedy rappers, you know, heavy beats, but you need something, and this album really doesn't have much at all. Occasionally Boogie steps out of his comfort zone and, you know, throws in a hook, throws in like an off-kilter flow. I guess off-kilter for his style, because most of the time he's pretty much in the same monotone delivery. But occasionally he switches up his flow in a few tracks. And honestly, it's even worse when he tries to do that, because he really can't sell the hooks on Silent Ride. Or really when he switches up his flow, he sounds quite nasally and annoying. Silent Ride though, really one of the worst tracks here with the I'm in love, I'm in love, I'm in love. Just a terrible lazy hook. Just get someone else to sing it, man. You have singers on the album featured like Snow Allegra. You could just get another feature to do a hook like that. Yeah, man. Speaking of Snow Allegra, I'm a huge fan of her last album, and her EP was pretty good too. But yeah, she's just doing nothing here. Like, she does a bit of singing on the last track, adds nothing to the track. Her feature is a nothing feature, really. As with Jid, I didn't really feel like Jid added to the track he was on. His verse felt really short too, and it was just a breeze. Like, it just came and went. Didn't really feel like it was fully fleshed out or whatever. Just really kind of pointless. And I did mention Eminem earlier, and his feature, man, is funny. That fucking Shepherd line went obviously quite viral on social media. People mocking Eminem for the terrible opening line to his verse. And yeah, the rest of it as well is just really pointless. Like, at this point, he's really, really trying hard. And I don't really know what he's attempting to achieve. Like, he can't really throw a bar together without throwing in like a really terrible, cringy line. And a part of me does kind of feel bad for him, because he's not the only rapper that has terrible lyrics, but every time he comes through with a bad lyric, he gets shot down fucking instantly by anyone on the internet, which I mean, he deserves it because his lyrics are just that bad these days, but I do kind of wish other rappers out there got the same treatment because he's certainly not the only guy that comes out with lyrics like this. I guess it's probably because he's considered the GOAT, and the GOAT can't even put in a guest feature without fucking it up and sounding terrible. I do see what's going on with him. It's just sad. But yeah, as for good tracks here, I would definitely say Whose Fault, which features Christian Scott Atunde Adjua, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. Yeah, this is a nice beat. Like, it's a really chilled out, lovely beat, and you can tell that the inclusion of Christian Scott added to the track too. But not only that, but I do really like the lyrics on this track too, where he's talking about, this guy who didn't have a father around and his life has kind of gone to shit, and he's talking about how sad it is to see his life end up this way when it could have been so much better if he just had a better start to his life, as opposed to not having that father figure to teach him how to be a man. Really poignant lyrics here. I do really like what the subject matter of this song entails, but for the rest of the album there isn't any standout moments really. It's just sort of like, yeah, whatever, like he's rapping about girls on some tracks, doesn't really pop out in any significant way. Because of the chilled, laid-back, lazy flows across this entire album, I don't really hone in on the lyrics at any point. Like, I'm just kind of like waiting for the next track to kind of pick up or something come through to add to the track in any significant way, but it never just does. And as I mentioned about the flows occasionally popping out in a bad way, that just interrupts the momentum of the album in a really weak kind of way, like on tracks like Self-Destruction, where it's like, self-destruction, at least he's attempting something different and not going for the same thing every track, which probably would have been even worse. But then I can't really commend him for it because it just sounds so bad. Yeah, I just got nothing from this album really. Not really a bad album. Like, I don't think I can go as far as saying it's bad because the beats are nice. His flows are fine on most of the tracks. It just pops out in a bad way on a few tracks, and yeah, that's just kind of it. So yeah, it's really an easy 5 out of 10. Just seems like a flavour of the week rapper that in about 2 or 3 months, no one's going to be talking about this guy. Like, I'm sure of it. Like, this album just doesn't have a staying power whatsoever. Let me know your thoughts if you've heard this, if you thought it was better than what I said. Let me know as well. Subscribe to the channel for more reviews. Have a good day. Hope you enjoyed the review. Goodbye.